Hi everyone, it's Louisa DC here. Today I want to talk about the wrong way to write a memoir because I just cannot believe how much is mistaught, ill-perceived, taught the wrong way about this particular genre. So if you've never heard of me before, if this is the first time you've watched one of my videos, my name is Louisa. I've written and sold 2 traditionally published books that were both memoirs, and I went down every wrong track that you could think of. I actually studied writing and editing for 5 years at university. I did a literature degree followed by professional writing and editing at RMIT in Melbourne. And I worked as a freelance journalist. I worked as an editor. I worked as in media and marketing and communications and copywriting for digital and print media. And I just found that the book publishing industry, of all of the writing and media and publishing industries, was the most elusive, exclusive, hidden, secretive, hierarchical of all. And particularly with my first book, which was a travel memoir, Love and Other U-Turns, these misconceptions about how to write a memoir, and I put that in quotation marks because I actually didn't even I didn't know that term then, because of how little it's taught, meant that it took me a lot longer. It was more difficult than it needed to be, and it was harder for me to get it published. But I did get it published when I learnt how to write it the right way and how to approach this particular category of literature. And I also wrote and sold my second memoir, and both have sold really, really well in the traditional publishing market, despite the fact that I'm from Australia, I don't have a huge platform, and I'm not a famous person, okay? So it is all possible for you, and a best-selling memoir is within your reach if you can grasp these absolutely crucial aspects of the genre. Okay, so a memoir, I want to define the genre of memoir very first and foremost. A memoir is a personal story, a true story based on your own experiences, and it's a book-length work of literature told from your perspective of your experiences. Now, you might have elements of biography in there. You might have elements of investigative journalism in there, historical research, as I did with my second book, A Letter from Paris. You might have biography, such as I did, of my father in A Letter from Paris. But the book was fundamentally told from my perspective. So that category is defined as memoir in publishing circles, okay? So the very first thing you need to understand is that it's called memoir, this category of literature. It's not a nonfiction. It is not a novel, not a novel. If you are telling a true story based on your own experiences, this is not a novel. It is a memoir. Okay, so the very first thing that is probably the worst advice you could give to a memoir writer is to just write. Just have a go. Just get the words out. And this is what I did with my first memoir, because I thought, there was no step-by-step process, even though I'd been to university and I'd studied professional writing and editing. I learnt quite a bit about novel, writing scenes and the craft of writing, but I wasn't taught memoir as a category. Now, the reason that just writing, which might work for a fiction novel and NaNoWriMo, if you've ever done National Novel Writing Month, in which the goal is just to get all those words down, is because memoir, being a personal story, has the potential to do very, very good things for you, i.e. completely transform how you see yourself and your life, but it also has the potential to bring you down into the depths of misery because you're writing about your own experiences. And some of these experiences, because life, are not that good. And so when we write and when we really get in deeply to the writing process about things that we've experienced and often, memories and things that we have perceived as very, very stressful or traumatic, then we can sometimes get so bogged down by these feelings that we don't know how to lift ourselves out of that. And this is very particular to memoir, because with a fiction novel, you are not writing about your own experiences. So, you're not triggering those memories in yourself. You're not triggering that physical reaction, because the unconscious and the subconscious, I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm not a psychologist, but I do love to study how these mindfulness and psychological aspects help us as writers. When we are processing things through writing, it can bring up very, very physical reactions, and very much like we are there in that moment again, say 20 years ago or 30 years ago when the stressful thing happened. If you don't have mechanisms in place to look after yourself as you are doing this, you can run into trouble. Now, I went down a rabbit hole of researching the power of writing as an art therapy. So many people think of art therapy as painting, and even music therapy is a very powerful tool, which I've written some articles on, which I just find it fascinating, because it works with the brain. And anyway, narrative therapy, which is writing and structuring our stories, is incredibly powerful, but only if you do it in a certain way. And it's incredibly therapeutic only if you do it in a certain way. Whereas most people, if you apply this just right rule to memoir, you aren't following these protocols that are going to help you to completely transform your story, to feel good as you write, to know how to make a constructive meaning and sense of your experience, and to take yourself out of it and look after yourself and feel good as you write, okay? So one of the studies of the many, many studies into how writing memoir particularly, and true stories, can affect us positively and negatively. One of my favorite studies is very, very interesting because it talks about patients in a hospital setting who were given the task of writing about the most stressful thing in their lives. And now one group of these patients had very, very good positive long-term outcomes. They used less painkillers. They were able to recover quicker from surgery. They had better long-term health conditions after 1 to 2 years. And then another group were worse off, and they had more pain, and they needed more painkillers and all sorts of other things. So you can see that the same thing, writing a true story based on your own experiences, can have vastly different physical outcomes depending on the way you do it. Now, what they found in the patients who had a positive outcome is that they followed a narrative framework. The patients that didn't have a positive outcome, who were worse off, who needed more pain relief, and physically and mentally were not as well, were just writing. So just stream of consciousness, were given no framework, no structure, no context with which to approach their story, just told to write, almost like you'd tell someone to just, do an hour of writing a day. So it's this unstructured approach that it can be really, really detrimental with memoir, because of that whole trauma and stress and memory aspect of it, because that is what makes this genre of writing so particularly different to writing a fiction or writing a nonfiction that is not narrative in structure. So a nonfiction that is not a memoir would be something like a how-to guide or a step-by-step business book. Okay, but if you're writing a true story based on your own lived experience, a creative nonfiction that has, might have elements of other people's lives in there. Of course, no life is just your own. You're going to interact with other people. You can't help but write other people in your memoir. But if you are telling the story from your perspective, you must use a narrative framework and a structure and follow a particular protocol, or you could get yourself into misery, which, just as an anecdotal, at an anecdotal level, I have found with so many writers who, if I say, what do you do? I say, I'm a memoir teacher. Like, oh, that's so miserable, just sitting there with your memories. And actually, nothing could be further from the truth, if you ask me. I can honestly say to you that writing my two books totally changed me, and particularly with my second memoir, which was much more difficult in terms of memories that I was working through. So there was grief involved there because I was writing about a very, very stressful, or not stressful, but a difficult, it was a difficult story to contextualize. The outcomes were so much bigger and brighter for me because I was essentially rewiring my brain through rewriting that story and taking control of the narrative. But I did need to follow certain protocol to do this, okay? And most people don't know what this is. They don't even know the difference between fiction and memoir, or autobiography and memoir as a category of literature. So in summary, telling someone to just write or just get the words down, but just get the first draft down and then we'll have a think about what to do with that, is the worst advice that you could give someone writing a true story based on their own experiences, okay? It's also, if I think about any big project or skill or thing that you could be approaching, say driving a car, or from an artistic point of view, if you're approaching the task of playing the piano with this mindset of just have a go and we'll look at it and we'll review it after, it makes no sense. How am I going to know how to drive a car if I haven't learned the step-by-step process for where to sit, where to put my arms, what that is used for, what do I do with my left foot, how do I, what are the road rules, how does this go? You can't just, give it a go. And it's the same with playing the piano. You can reinforce terrible practices if you try to approach any of the arts in that way. I learnt piano as a child, and I remember everything from my posture at the piano to the way that my hands were being held, to the chords, to the keys. Everything was taught to me step by step in this way, so that then I could build and build and build my knowledge base to then be able to now play. I can sight read music and just sit down at a piano, even though I haven't played in years, and bang out a song. And it's the same with writing. If you understand these frameworks and these structures from that, if you've been taught really, really well to how to approach true story in this genre, and how to structure it, then you can use these skills much like you use piano playing or driving a car, with any car and any piano, okay? But it's important to master these absolute fundamental parts of it first. And I think writing is different because I don't know any other career where people, even the arts such as painting and sculpture, where someone would say, oh yeah, just have a go, and we'll get someone to critique your sculpture after. You are taught the fundamentals of how to approach this work and this process. So this is why I teach the Art of Memoir is a comprehensive page by step process that is not focusing on one element of the craft, how to write a scene, how to write dialogue, or how to set up your computer. It is the entire process with a focus on structure and the principles of memoir, and particularly what sells. So, okay, moving on from the just right advice and approach. The second piece of this, the wrong way to write a memoir, is having sitting down to write and approaching this as though it is a whim or a fancy or a hobby. Okay, maybe someone told you to write. Okay, you've got an interesting story, and this is actually quite common. You might have been through a really big experience, an interesting, fascinating life event, and many people have said to you, "Gosh, this would make a great book. Why don't you write a book about this?" And so you're starting it based on someone else's energy, I guess. And what you really need to do is clarify your why and your values and how this book is going to align with that. Because a memoir, a book, is work. It's a long-term project. It's not something that you're going to finish in a week or even a month. With my memoir writing program, I teach you how to approach this, how to write it and revise it over 6 months to a year. And that is because you won't be submitting the first draft to publishers. This is the other thing that is wrong with that approach of having no deadline, treating it as a hobby or a whim or just something that you're not that attached to and someone else has asked you to do it. You're not attached. You're not going all in on this. So without aligning this to your core values and your long-term vision for your life, you won't do the work that's required. And you also will not see the need to differentiate, and this is really, really important. You won't understand the need to differentiate between what you write to get the story out there, to understand, see the story, get all the content there, and then how you need to turn that into a contextual story. So you won't understand the difference between writing for therapeutic purposes, for example, and then being able to step outside yourself objectively and go, okay, that was important for me to write as part of this process, but in terms of other people reading it and an audience for this work, this material does not need to be included. So it's almost like you need to be two different people to write a memoir. You need to be a writer and an editor and also the audience. Okay, that's three. Because to write a fiction, you would need to be the writer and the editor as well. But as a memoir writer, a key piece of writing a memoir is relatability. And that's another thing that people often get wrong. They're like, okay, but my story is so unique. No one's ever experienced this before. No one's ever done this before. Da, 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 da. If you can't find the relatable aspect to your story, then you won't sell it and you won't be able to find what's compelling about it. Because what compels people to read a memoir when you're not a celebrity or a famous politician or a president is that relatability factor of human life. How does your story relate to me who lives on the other side of the world or is maybe of a different gender or socioeconomic standing or background? So that relatability aspect and being able to hold those three, sort of separate pieces of this, the first draft version of you, the editor version of you, and the audience and universal and relatable aspect of you. And so if you can get really strong and clear on your vision for this book and why you are writing it and how it aligns with your values and your deadline and why it's important, and commit to this wholeheartedly, not just as a whimsical thing, you will actually do the work that's required to bring this to publication standard, because it is work. Now, it doesn't need to be miserable. And the whole reason that I shared with you the data and the studies into writing personal narrative without a framework versus with a framework is because I want you to see that there is so much potential with memoir, unlike other categories of literature, to completely transform your life, to change the way you view yourself and your story. It is the most powerful way to change your life because you are literally changing it from the inside out. You are changing the perspective with which you assign meaning to certain events and experiences. Now, you can't change the past, and you are working through your memories as part of the process of writing a memoir, but you can change the way you view the past. And the way you change the way you view the past is to look at it in context using these narrative frameworks that I teach in the Art of Memoir and assigning completely new meaning to the events of your life. Because when you have a different perspective on what something meant and how it interplayed with the other things that happened and then led to that and then became that and that was that, on a symbolic level, I mean, that is basically the basis of psychotherapy and all therapeutic storytelling arts. And if you can do that for yourself with the most significant story that you've ever lived through, then, I mean, I don't know what else could be more empowering than that. I know that from my own perspective, writing my memoir in this way, my second book, A Letter from Paris, which I would not have been able to do without these frameworks, processes, and this pathway, completely transformed my identity at a core level, because your identity is made up of the stories that you tell yourself, okay? And what if you could tell a better story about what things meant? This is essentially the difference between a draft and a publication standard story. Content versus context. And content is just words, the draft. And context is a story. You are creating context for yourself and for readers to come in and read this work, and they are getting this meaning from this story, and they are relating to it, and they are seeing how they can apply and feel and connect with that in their own lives. And that is the work of memoir, and that is the beauty of it. And that's the difference between a draft that was for you and a publication standard true story. So I hope this has helped you. The wrong way to write a memoir is just to write, which seems to be the advice given to most writers with their first book. And this is why I've created the program that I've been teaching now for 5 years to dozens of writers to get them to the finish line and then get their books published and written to publication standard. This process is something that you can use for more than one book. I've had writers take the Art of Memoir and using and now realizing that first draft that they came in with was actually the beginning of 3 different books. And so they're using this material to write the second book and the third, because that's the thing about storytelling. It's all about the structure. Another thing that writers find inside the Art of Memoir is that there's a lightness to it. And this is something that I really, really want to make clear. This process does not need to be miserable, okay? The reason you are miserable while writing your memoir is because you don't have this contextual framework or container with which to approach it. It's like you're diving into your memories and you can't get yourself out of there. But if you have the stepping stones and the guidance, you know exactly what to do, when to finish those writing sessions, how to know when you're off track, what to do when a particular scene or part of the story is too stressful for you to write about. Move to the next bit. But it's all about seeing this stuff in context. And, you know, to take it to publication standard is the work involved. And this is why, you know, I do stress that I teach memoir for traditional publishing, not for, you know, people who want to write, say, a document just to hand out to their family and friends as a family history document, because these levels of understanding and these layers of understanding of the literary genre in traditional publishing, it's a much higher standard to get a memoir traditionally published. It is a very complex genre. And so I figure, since I was able to do this twice and get both of these books published, and I'm not famous, then I've got something to teach you about what you can do with your story. And also, there is something remarkably therapeutic in that part of the process. Seeing how your story is relatable to a massive amount of people is really, really, I don't know if it's healing, but it is illuminating, because you understand that you are not alone. None of us are alone in this journey. None of us. And just like Willa Cather's said or wrote in O Pioneers, there are only 2 or 3 human stories, and they go on repeating themselves as if they'd never happened before. Yes, your story is going to be similar to so many other stories across the world, but that's the beauty. No one will have approached that, reacted to that, done that, seen that, felt that in the way that you felt it, or reacted, or taken action the way that you took action. And it's by following these patterns and structures and themes that I teach you in the Art of Memoir, very much like you would learn chords, notes on a scale, keys to play piano, that you can then go and write your own music. You could be the next Mozart, Beethoven, whatever your name is, if you have these foundational elements. But if you're just going and sitting down at the keyboard and you're going to bang out, just have a go and then wait and pay someone to give you a critique on how you played that effort with no training, then it's not going to go well. Okay, so I hope this has helped you. I'm just going to finish up here, but yeah, if you would like to know more about the Art of Memoir, it's my comprehensive step-by-step system and process I've followed myself and taken over dozens of writers through to write their first, second, third draft. So there's a whole revision component of this that is incredibly important to master. I will link to where you can find out about my my program, The Art of Memoir, below.